The wind moved across the barren plains like a restless ghost, carrying with it the dust of old, trails and the faint rattle of grasshoppers, hidden beneath the dry stalks. The ranch lay silent under the red glow of sundown, a lonely collection of barns and fences, surrounded by emptiness that stretched for miles. It was a place where silence meant safety. But on this evening, silence had turned into a warning. Inside the corral, a horse stamped nervously, sensing what its owner had not yet seen. The rancher, tall and broad-shouldered, leaned against a fence post with his hat pulled low, watching the horizon. He had lived too long in this wild country not to feel danger before it came, and something about the air told him trouble was near. Then he saw her, walking slow, stumbling almost, her clothes torn, dust clinging to her bare skin. Her face was hidden beneath tangled hair, but her steps carried both exhaustion and defiance. She leaned against the side of his barn as though she had been running for days. He did not move at first, only squatted down in the dirt a few paces away, watching her as a man does when unsure whether he's looking at a friend or a threat. Her eyes, when she finally lifted them, were sharp as broken glass, yet filled with the kind of desperation that only comes from running too long. "Wait," she whispered, her voice breaking with both fear and determination. "I take it off." The rancher froze, his weathered hands tightening on his knees. He didn't yet understand what she meant. But her tone carried a weight heavier than the desert night. She began tugging at the edge of her torn shirt, her voice cracking again as she repeated the words, this time with a bitter smile that hid more pain than amusement. "I take it off. That's what they wanted, isn't it? That's what they always wanted." He could see the bruises now, dark stains against her skin, the marks of men who had no law but their own cruelty. She let the shirt hang loose, not to seduce but to reveal, to show the truth of what she had endured. The rancher felt something stir in him, anger. Yes, but also an unshakable resolve. He had seen cruelty before. This land was full of it. But to see it laid bare on a woman who had fought to survive, it struck him like a bullet to the chest. He stood slowly, dust rising from his boots, his voice steady as the plains. "You don't need to take anything off," he said. "Not here. Not ever again." She stared at him, untrusting, uncertain whether to believe. Men had said words before, promises like whiskey, sweet for a moment, bitter after. But the look in his eyes was different. They were not the eyes of a man seeking power. They were the eyes of a man who had lived alone too long to lie. Still, before trust could settle, the sound of hooves split the silence. From beyond the ridge, riders emerged. 3 men in dark coats, carrying rifles across their saddles. The girl flinched at the sight, her back pressing harder against the barn wall. Her bruises told their story. These men were no strangers. The rancher's hand hovered near the revolver at his hip, his jaw tightening. He knew what was coming, but he also knew this was no ordinary trouble. This was the kind that changed everything. As the men rode closer, the leader spat into the dirt, his grin wide and cruel. "Evening, cowboy," he drawled. "You found yourself something that belongs to us." The rancher's stance didn't change, but his silence carried a message. The girl clutched at the wooden boards behind her, whispering so softly only he could hear, "Don't let them take me back. I'd rather die right here." In that instant, the rancher made his choice. He shifted his weight, hand ready at his side. His whole life had been about survival, about minding his own land and letting the world tear itself apart without him. But now, with the desert wind pressing against his face and the girl's trembling breath beside him, he knew survival wasn't enough anymore. The next moment would decide whether he stood as just a rancher or something greater. The air grew heavy, the riders drew closer, and the girl's last whispered words lingered in his ears. "Wait, I take it off," she had said. But now it wasn't her burden to bear alone. It was his fight, too. And when he lifted his eyes to meet the men before him, the Wild West itself seemed to hold its breath. The first shot cracked across the ranch like thunder splitting the sky, and suddenly the quiet of sundown was drowned beneath chaos. The rancher's revolver fired true, his body moving not by thought but by instinct carved from years in the saddle and nights, spent with danger lurking beyond the firelight. One rider fell, his rifle clattering to the ground, dust swallowing him whole. The others charged, their horses screaming against the sudden violence. The woman pressed against the barn wall, her fingers digging into the rough wood, her eyes wide as the man she barely knew stood alone against, the devils who had haunted her. The rancher moved with a grim steadiness, his boots rooted in the dirt as if the earth itself had claimed him as its defender. Another shot rang, this time grazing his arm, drawing blood but not slowing his stance. He gritted his teeth, eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his hat, and fired again. The second rider fell, his horse bolting into the open fields, leaving only dust and silence in its wake. The leader dismounted, rage burning hotter than the desert sun, and stalked forward with a blade glinting in his hand. "You think she's yours now?" he snarled. "She belongs to no one," the rancher's voice thundered back, echoing across the plains. His revolver empty, he drew his knife, and the two men clashed beneath the wide-open sky, steel against steel, grunts of fury mixing with the restless whinny of the waiting horses. The woman watched, torn between terror and awe, her heart beating with a desperate rhythm. This wasn't just a fight for her freedom. It was a fight that would decide whether she could believe in hope again. The struggle was brutal, neither man giving ground easily. Dust rose around them, shrouding the scene like smoke from a battlefield. At last, with a surge of strength born not of rage but of purpose, the rancher twisted the blade from the outlaw's hand and drove him to the ground. The outlaw gasped his last breath beneath the unrelenting stars, his curse fading into silence. The rancher stood, his chest heaving, his arm bleeding, but his eyes fixed only on the woman. She took a hesitant step forward, then another, until she stood close enough to see the weariness etched into his face. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for me?" He lowered his gaze, wiping blood from his brow, and said softly, "Because no one should ever have to fight alone." The words broke something inside her, something she had carried too long, fear, shame, despair. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow but of release. For the first time in years, she felt the weight lifting. Together they buried the bodies at the edge of the ranch, marking the graves with nothing more than stones. The land would reclaim them, as it always did. When it was done, they sat in silence, the night wrapping around them. The stars glittered above, cold and eternal, yet somehow less lonely than before. She looked at him, her voice barely more than a breath. "What happens now?" The rancher glanced at the horizon, where dawn would soon paint the sky, and answered, "Now, everything changes." And in that moment, beneath the vast and endless Wild West, the story of one woman's survival and one man's choice was sealed forever. But their journey had only begun. If you've ridden with them this far, friend, don't turn back now. Subscribe to this channel, saddle up, and join us for more Wild West stories, because out here, every sunrise brings a tale worth telling, and you won't want to miss the next one.